Can you hear me, Alessio?
Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah, we can hear you, Alessio. Okay, so please take the floor. The floor is yours. Thank you, everybody, and good evening. It's a two in the afternoon. Two afternoon. So it was an extremely interesting this presentation, I have to say, and also the survey was extremely interesting. So to understand who is already knowing the green manure and all. In order to go into the details, first of all, I have to thank you for your presentation. I have to specify that I'm an agronomist. I travel across Italy from north to south, following the activities of several organic farming activities, helping them improving their crops. Moreover, I have a family company which I used as an experiment, 3 hectares,
Di diffonderle sono state provate per anni.
and sorry, there is a problem with audio. I'm hearing another voice. I don't know if it's the translation, but still, let's go on. I will go on, maybe. Okay, it's a great honor for me here to have this opportunity to talk about this important issue and to share with you a few information. I am a great supporter of sharing of know-how. There is a world which is made of small, medium, and big enterprises which do not communicate, and research is just entrusted to multinational corporations bringing new techniques and products. If these small realities could communicate among them, this could be the way towards a great innovation. This is why I accepted this invitation from Naturland to attend this seminar, which is heading towards these directions. So I'm very pleased to be here with you today. So what is green manure? Well, green manuring is an antique and ancient technique which was used in the past to improve the fertility of the soil. In the last few years, in Italy in particular, there was a great discovery
Abbiamo iniziato ad usarlo nei vigneti.
of the importance of a green manure because it brings a great possibility of increasing the yield. It is also supported the financing of green manuring species to be used in our soil and to improve their production. I deal with fruit and vegetables mainly, and we did something very simple in the beginning. We collected all the information coming from wine growing sector, and then we applied it in our fields producing fruit and vegetables, because we have to say something clearly. We have to work to cultivate the soil. When a soil is fertile, it's healthy, we can do whatever we want on that soil. So it's just not about putting products for letting the plants growing, yeah, but we have to cultivate, take care of the soil and its health, of course, so to get to considerable production and then healthy production also. So green manuring. We have to go back to the previous slide. Okay, Thomas, I will let you know when to go on with my slides. Well, so it's an agronomic practice. Green manuring is an agronomic practice that consists in the sowing of herbaceous crops that after their maturing will be chopped or and put in the soil or let just like that on the soil. We will see that when we will opt for one option or another. This way is done to bring much more nitrogen to the soil. This is made in the green manuring in Italy and Europe in order to improve the nitrogen content. In the time we discovered that by introducing other species, we were able to create an exceptional product and also a competitive product, and replacing also the manure itself. So I'm talking from Tuscany in this moment. Here we have a big issue in fighting high quality manure. Maybe in South America and in other realities, in other areas in Asia, for example, they do not have problems in finding good manuring. But if there is a problem in finding a good kind of manure without antibiotics and at accessible and acceptable price. Well, this is the situation that we are facing now, not just here, but also in other areas in Europe. So if we have to increase the fertility of our soil, we use this green manuring technique, creating a high quality humus compared to manure itself. In our area where manure is still there, but it's not that easy to find it, it's much more cheap to find these green manuring species. If there is an area which is rich in manure because there are many cattle breedings and all this, that's okay. Otherwise, if we can use it just in a small part, then we have to resort to the green manuring because this brings fertility in the long term, while in most of the cases, manuring, if it's not properly handled, will give us an appearing a temporary fertility, which will not last till the following year. Let's go on with the slides now. So, as I told you before, green manuring was born from the cultivation of legumes. So the nitrogen fixing products, which through a symbiosis of bacteria can fix the atmospheric nitrogen in the soil. These plants do this not because they just want to gift us something, because they just do it like that only, but they do that because during the development and the growth of the plant, they fix this nitrogen at the roots, and where they transform it, so they become fruit. This happens in soy and other peas, and other species. When the fruit is born, so following the seed stadium, this nitrogen moves from the roots to the inner part of the seeds. These are issues which are well known to the vegan people looking for protein in their food, and this is well known to them maybe already. So green onion rich in legumes will bring much more nitrogen. It will have very rooted roots, enriching the surface of the superficial layers of the soil with the nutrients taken from the deeper ones. That's to say that a root which is able to reach 2 meters depth, besides fixing nitrogen at 2 meters depth, is also able, in order to develop and to grow and to develop the part outside the soil, to withdraw the nutrients from the surface to 2 meters depth, and it brings it outside the soil. So when I cut the plant, this vegetable part is following attacked by microorganisms and others which will affect the plant, and these will spread the nutrients while releasing them in the very first centimeters of the soil and of the layer. Am I talking too fast? Thomas, please help me. I don't know if the interpreters are complaining. No, nobody complained, but if you want to slow down anyhow, it's okay. Okay, by doing so, I will not lose the nutrients with the rains and other processes where the nutrients are taken to the roots, but I always keep them in the very first centimeters of the layers. So vegetables show the extremely interesting abilities from 0 to 20 centimeters, and from 0 to 40 centimeters, all vegetables, the ability to shift these nutrients. 0 40 centimeters, it's the part where they keep mainly the first and the most important nutrients, while green manuring, which is based on gramineaceae or grasses, let's say, is rich in fibers. We will see that afterwards, and it will release much more carbon. It will have a root which is shorter, which is closer to the soil, and which will also improve the physical structure of the soil while providing much more fertility in the long term. It's not a short-term fertility, but a long-term fertility. So it's clear that while mixing legumes and grass plants, it's extremely useful to provide for a different fertility, to bring new nitrogen contributions, but also other nutrients in the long term, and to give also the grass plants further fertility in the coming years. I forgot to tell you something in the very beginning, which I believe is extremely important to the agronomists and the students and to the farmers I always say that I have to assess the ability of a farmer, of a company, let's say, on the basis of its sustainability, on the way they properly manage their company as a whole, and on the basis of their management of the green manure. Because if I have an empty field, an empty soil, I have harvested potatoes, I have an empty field, and it will remain so for 4 months. Sun, rain, and things like that. I'm just losing fertility. I'm just losing nutrients. I am just leaving that field to be populated by grasses only. So, in this situation where I have spontaneous grasses growing there, well, they are trying to keep on working on the fertility, of course, of the surface layers of the field, of course, despite the erosion made by the wind or the action of the sun, which oxidates the nutrients. So these grasses just block these nutrients, and they convert it in the vegetable mass that I will find when I will decide to sow again that field. So there will be new microorganisms which will be translated into nutrients. But if I am a professional, if I have studied it, if I got the basis of how this works, I can also be work as an added value, and I can also apply my uh, green manuring technique there, and without losing nutrients, but also increasing the nutrients in my soil. And I can do that both in the short term for the following crop, or I can increase it on the long term in case there is a healthy, good soil, an excellent soil. But I can keep on working on this high fertility, this high humus content for the coming years. So if I implement green manuring, which at the end of the cycle will start, of course. In this case, it will be used for keeping the fertility in the forthcoming years. If I have, for example, a soil of pumpkins, and I collect them, I harvest them in September. Just think of the development of a pumpkin. They need a lot of water. They absorb a high quantity of nutrients from the soil. Well, on September I harvest those pumpkins, and that field will be inactive till April, let's say. So there is the perfect condition for starting in September, October to implement this green banking so that I can reintegrate all the nutrients which I withdrawn while harvesting the pumpkins, while also providing another kind of fertility to the soil. So properly using green manuring means being professionals and being good and cropping our fruit and vegetable species, olives, wine, and all the others. So I deal with this. So I'm just bringing my experience, but it can also be implemented in other fields, of course, in other croppings. Please go on. So what do we ask of a green manual? Of course, green manual is a further weapon, let's say, to cultivate in a sustainable and environment-friendly way our soil. Sometimes it's not properly used because its potential is not really well known in depth. So let's see and explore the potential of this technique. So first of all, what do we want from our green manure? We want, of course, a fast growth, rapid growth, because if I have 3 months for cropping, the more photosynthesis, the more species I'm able to grow on my field, the more will have humus and other nutrients to be replaced in the soil, which will work as nutrients for the following crop, the next crop. So having crops which grow very fast in the short term, it's fundamental. So if I just have 3 months, this will be much more important. If I have 6 months, I will opt for other solutions because they will grow much slower, but still they will grow. If I have 1 year, if I have a field which will be empty for 1 year, I can also combine other mixes which will grow slowly, but maybe they will have a more interesting release of nutrients and elements and constituents. Then we will see that in my presentation. Then we seek for a good competition with wheat. If I have some fields that during the summer, autumn, winter, well, I have some specific wheats, or there are mixes of green manure able to grow very fast in 1 to 3 months, are able to reach interesting height like 1 meter 82 meters. So this is fast growth and a great combination of water, light, and space can suffocate the weights. So in most of the cases, we have a lot of fields which have some specific species, like, for example, wild grasses. There, it should be interesting to sow kind of green manures able to suffocate the weeds themselves. So we are able to reduce the presence of the weeds which are in our soil while reducing gradually but constantly also. This to foster the growth of the coming plants, the plants which will be grown there in a second moment. In the cases of fields which are not cultivated for many, many years and which are affected by many weeds, I advise also to have 1 2 cycles of green manuring for the farmer. Maybe uh, this could sound crazy, but I can tell you that in most of the cases, it's definitely better to stop the activity for 1 year, maybe, and then restart with unhealthy soil without weeds, rich in humus, rich in microorganism and fertility, giving great results instead of setting up an immediate production in order to make money, because easy money does not exist in agriculture. Quality matters. Sometimes this way of acting brings us in the long term to lose a lot of money, to waste a lot of money. But it's better to go slower and starting from a healthy soil instead of producing continuously on a soil which is full of weeds and poor of nutrients. So it's better to slow down and restart it in an optimal way, in a better way, just after a few times. I know it's easy to be said and harder to be done, but I have seen the difference in many companies which were able to produce much more. Of course, green manure has good green mass production, hardness and resistance to drought. There are seeds which are able to develop on all kinds of soil. Green manure, as I said before, positively affects the qualities of the soil, chemical, physical, and microbiological features of the soil. What do we mean by saying chemical features of the soil? All plants and all the mixes that we have available can release soil nutrients within the soil. They are some species will leave much more nitrogen, potassium, magnesium, and different elements, of course. And on the basis of their combination, I will be able to improve and compensate nutrients in my soil if they're lacking. So what do I do from the agronomist point of view? I analyze the soil available, and if I see a lack of phosphorus, potassium, nitrogen, or let's say iron, magnesium, or other elements, Well, we can implement some targeted and tailor-made green manures using plastic ashes, having the ability to release and fix nitrogen in the soil, or others which are able to activate potassium. So if I have a crop of potatoes or pumpkins, I can make it, I can do it after the cropping of plants able to increase potassium and other elements. In Italy, phosphorus and potassium, for example, are pretty available in the soils, but sometimes I have to say they are there, but they are not available for the plants because they are kept by the plant sometimes. Rapeseed, for example, is a plant which is able to mobilize it, to activate it. Of course, this changes according to the different areas of the world. Of course, it should be approached like a case study and a case by case study, of course. But of course, these kinds of green manures are very interesting in order to understand how to improve the chemical properties of the soil. So green manures meant as a real way of fertilizing, making more fertile the soil. So improving the physical qualities and features of the soil. What are these physical features? The lightness, the ability of breathing of a soil. The soil is made of pores, and these pores are made by particles of soil from where the air passes and water passes also. So having a green manure with a deep root will bring me, when I will cut it, to have a plant where the roots will be attacked by weeds and microorganisms. So these roots are eaten slowly, slowly, slowly by these microorganisms, and they will release some other nutrients, of course, and other elements. So the places which were originally occupied by the roots will be spaces for letting the air pass through. So with the air passing through, the structure of the soil will be lighter, will be better, and it's extremely interesting in the case of extremely heavy soils where the agricultural machines, for example, are passing too often, for example. So using a proper and adequate green manure is extremely important to make the soil structure lighter, meaning saving fuel for working on these fields, of course, but also if this is made on a good soil, we can also totally remove the chopping activities and just working on the surface, on the layer, on the surface and sowing it. Also for saving the fuel costs for the agricultural machineries, which is also a cost, of course. So green manure is also a way for working also on the economic aspects of this practice, of course. So this could sound extremely interesting. Also, the microbiological features. This is extremely dear to Naturland. When I talk to farmers, I have to say to Italian farmers, there are organic farmers, there are conventional farmers who are trying to bring towards the sustainable agriculture system their ways of working. So we always try to explain this difficult thing to be explained to a conventional farmer or to a farmer in general. Fertility, as we know, and we have the proofs and the evidence of that. Fertility is given by the quantity of nutrients given by the soil, the ability to be able and the roots to be developed and to be ready for the soil, but also from the quantity of microorganisms which are present in the soil. Microorganisms are those that spread the nutrients. If a plant falls down and at the end of the cycle, for example, a tomato plant falls down, a peach tree falls down, papaya, mango, avocado, other fruits. Well, if a soil is alive and it's full of microorganism, microorganism, of course, worms, for example, on one hand, like and other microorganisms. These microorganisms will attack it while spreading new nutrients on the soil. If oxygen is available, then it will work like this. The example I was giving you before, the 2 meters roots with microorganism attacking the roots, this process will spread nutrients, but this will also allow the oxygen to go into the depth, 1 meter, 2 meters depth. And this will also allow oxygen to enter through this channel, which was before used by the roots to grow and to penetrate the soil. So this will allow the development of aerobic microorganisms which need oxygen, of course, which are useful for the soil and for the defense of the soil, that one that we inoculate in the roots. So to get proper microorganisms, these aerobic microorganisms, they need oxygen. So while oxygenating, giving oxygen to the terrain, we also increase the presence of microorganisms which are useful for our croppings. So having a sick soil, we should foster the presence of harmful microorganisms with higher attacks of other weeds, which will cause problems for the roots and increasing the soil fatigue, let's say. So I have to work on proper microorganisms, otherwise I will not have the possibility of competing with the harmful weeds working in the soil. So I have to consider what I have to do, otherwise I will just kickstart a vicious cycle which will not work at the end of the fertilization of the soil, which is proper of the multinationals or big corporations, thus creating a biological emptiness, not working properly, of course, thus stimulating pathogenous weeds. So I will have much more difficulties in managing that soil. I will have to resort to proper fertilizers in order to restore the proper condition of the soil, just resorting to chemicals and products which are made available on the market, of course, while also polluting the soil. But this is my opinion, of course. We will not increase the carbon level in the soil, but we will just pollute it and reduce the presence of microorganisms. So I admit it's really interesting because microorganisms are extremely important, okay, but there is an issue. They are invisible. So it's difficult to convince a 70, 80 years old farmer who is used to cultivate his crop in a way on the importance of defending them. Of course, you can defend what you see, while understanding that a plant needs weeds and it's growing thanks to microorganisms is difficult to be explained. In the last few years, I worked a lot of microorganisms. I'm sorry if I'm just talking like this and going from one issue to another. Well, there is a big work on how to manage the microorganism in the soil, to keep them and to improve them, and not bringing other microorganisms both in other countries and other states. While instead, it's better to increase ours. There are microorganisms which are in our soil, and we have to work on that, on those microorganisms which are indeed available. So green manure is able to produce it. Let's go back. Sorry if I jump from one issue to another, but everything looks interesting. So I have to jump in the end. So working on the green manure is it's a big issue. You know, all these issues are indeed interconnected. So it's a big world, let's say, and we talk about sustainable agriculture or bad agriculture, basically. So we have to approach it from many sides. So green manure works on a good quantity of nitrogen and other nutrients. So if we consider it in many cases, connection, there's a problem in the connection.
pellettati che noi andiamo a dare. Perché i pellettati si sono diffusi? Perché sono più facili da utilizzare. perché il sovescio prevede
Green manure envisages a proper approach, proper attention, a proper study, while other forms of farming look maybe easier. I go to the consortium, I go to the shop, I buy 30, 40 quintals of fertilizers, but I will not have the same results. So the green manure, of course, requires a proper study, a proper approach. Then, if you please go on with the slide.
So what are the functions of manure? Sure has a fertilizing action, we've seen it already, the ability to bring nutrients to the soil. So we're talking about the chemical capacity of the soil. We use different mixtures which release different nutrients. Protecting soil, I had the possibility to see this when I lived in the south of Spain, and it is the southern part of Europe, which is becoming more and more important. And during the summer, when I live completely naked soil, or during autumn, when I have ripped soil after rain showers, or when I have plowed it, we leave uncovered soil with strong wind and rains. So we have erosion, wind erosion of the superficial layers, so which is the most important layer, because if we leave it naked without any cover crop, is always lost. So defending that layer means defending fertility of our land. So if I leave a plot still for 3 months, I do not leave it naked, because in summer the sun will action will make me lose 0.2, 0.3 of organic matter. If I leave it naked during autumn, during the fall, especially on a hill, I'm risking erosion of the first 2-3 centimeters. This erosion is it is possible to see it in vineyards when you cultivate vineyards or olive fields from the high ground going down. You see that in the higher part of the hill, you can clearly see the uncovered root. See 20 or 30 centimeters of root that were not there earlier, because the soil has moved downhill. And at the bottom of the hill, we see smaller plants, because the soil has moved again downhill. But the soil has still managed to remain within my plot. But if I have a river, I basically lose the soil. So I need to defend my soil both in the summer and during fall. And if I am operating with a plain field, I can leave it naked, because nutrients are brought in depth by the water, and when they go too much in depth, they will not be utilized for cultivated crops. So they are too in depth to be utilized by plant. That's why we need to stick to 25-30 centimeters with our green manure. And of course, different species such as rocket or horseradish remain within 10 centimeters, but most species are within 80. So protecting soil is a great function. And more than that, it brings about greater number of microorganisms. Uh, Here in Italy, we do nothing. We just sow, and then nature works for us, and we have such a low cost. Um, is nature self-replicating from the soil and improving these characteristics. So protection of the water tap, the ability, water table, um, within soils that have a great nitrogen presence. With manure, we can regulate the presence of nitrogen. We often speak of polluted soils with too much nitrogen. This is possible solution. These chemical elements could pollute our water table. Manure blocks this process and allows for these nutrients to be available, contributes to the structural stability of the soil, makes it lighter, it improves every characteristics of the soil. When we have had the manure, we can easily, with our hand, to move our soil around. You can see it is as it was reborn. It really turns poor, dried up soil around. You can clearly see, those of you that work in this field can understand the difference between a dead soil and a lively soil. So conventional farms, they usually carry chemical or visual analysis with universities, but agricultural operators know this difference, which is in the degree of fertility. And if this technique would be used more often, it would surely be beneficial for agricultural worker. So control of invasive weeds. Think about this wall of manure, 2 meters high. They suffocate every lower species. So when I chop down the manure, I chop down invasive weed as well. I can either wait for rain or get it wet. And this manure will again suffocate the invasive weeds that are present. I am hearing one of the participants speaking. Biocide action. This had not been mentioned earlier. There are some plants that we have selected here in Italy. I believe it's the same for the whole world. We have, I know plants from Italy, from Southern Europe, but small research helps you in that way. Yes, but someone has asked about specific type of vegetable, of crop. There's a specific kind of rocket, nematocide rocket. They have specific characteristics that allow it, when cropped, to be attacked by microorganisms, a process that releases a gas that completely kills nematodes. I tried this method in my farm, in other farms. It's a very powerful tool. It works in a fantastic way. We had farms completely overrun by invasives, farms that were dealing with cultivation of tomatoes and zucchini. Looked like it had good fertility, but along the years, due to incorrect rotations, we come to have great presence of nematode. After 3 years, it had made it almost impossible to cultivate, and a single cycle of nematicide rocket was sufficient to have a great effect uh, on the soil, and that's how we solved our nematode problem. This does not go for all pathogens. Um, we have to keep their presence under a certain threshold that allows us to cultivate. And it is a very cheap treatment, obviously. Many other plants have this function, have Targete and many more, but we need to first be able to understand what are the specific problem in order to identify the nematocide plants. So the way to use this rocket in greenhouses, you need to keep your greenhouse open, because otherwise, while chopping the rocket, the operator might also faint. You need ventilation, and you need to clear out of the greenhouse frequently. And this process lasts about a week. Uh, you sure want to avoid getting in the greenhouse, because the gas smell is um, not pleasant, but it works really well. You just need to search for nematocide rocket on the internet. Excuse me, Alessio, for interrupting you, but after this part, I would like to go with the breakout rooms, so you might want to finish your thought. For me, we're good. We can go. Okay, let's have a moment for our interpreters to rest. They will not be participating in this next phase. Okay, I will try to be a bit more concise, but I think it's very interesting. So about the pleasing, aesthetically pleasing aspect, we have agricultural farms where in Italy, where we also have restaurants. So pleasant plants, pleasant flowers with many colors are very useful. We have entire hills that are blooming and they are very beautiful. This is the aesthetic part. It's very interesting. It's detrimental to leave it aside. But from the mere, not just from the mere productive point of view. For instance, if you're cultivating olives, after collecting the olives, I can use, thanks to my manure procedure, a pleasant environment to look at in general. So this is part of the different way in which we want to carry our agricultural activities. The fact that it is a shelter for many types of insects. Uh, for instance, field bean attracts so many insects um, that will reproduce and eventually move to other parts of the field, such as ladybugs. In one field, we've made uh, field bean manure, and um, we were seeing so many ladybugs, and these ladybugs do not fly too far. They go look for things to eat to be able to reproduce, and they will become useful insects for our field. And this goes for our short-term manure, creating something useful for insects to pass the winter. I am creating biodiversity. They, when I have good biodiversity with many species of insects, when I have so many different species, I'm sure that I will not have any particularly dangerous attack by one specific type of insect. If it happens, it's because I've made some mistakes. Maybe my manure has brought too much nitrogen to my field, or some other type of mistake. But one thing is for sure, when I'm using manure in a good way, helps biodiversity in my farm, so there won't be any one particular species to take over. And the another very fascinating aspect is the mellifluous plants aspect. Specific varieties, and it has been so hard to produce honey in Italy for the last 5 years, and it's so hard to find quality honey nowadays. But there's some species that we can use as manure that allow us to produce a lot of honey. And if we are beekeepers, instead of putting a casual manure, we can use plants that help our honey production, and we can cut costs. We are experimenting with this concept in Italy, and this is a very important concept. So it contributes to the structural stability of the soil. It gives us fertility over the long period, but we've talked about this already. So there are different stages of manure. The choice of the mix to use is surely one of these phases. You need to find species that can give you maximum possible biomass in the time that you have. Maybe I can give you some information about that. If we have 6 months, we choose a variety. If we have 1 year, we choose another variety. Then we have to prepare the seed bed. There's many things, but what works every time is if we have a soil that's rich in invasive weeds, we chop them down, then we rip the soil, then we use milling machine at about 10 centimeters of depth. Then I can go with sowing with by hand or with the seed drill, And that depends, because if you have 10 hectares of vineyard, it's it's really easy to do it by hand, but once you get used to it, you go faster. It's very common to do sowing by hand. Our grandfathers were doing it regularly. Now we have machines, but we can choose what we want to do. If we do it by hand, we need to use a rake afterwards. If we use the seed drill, we do not. Sometimes we need to use double seed drills or combined seed drills that can put down different measures of seeds, and that helps us with mustards, which are very small seeds, and I cannot use a simple seed drill. I can use a combined seed drill, or I need to have to double the time that I'm using for the sowing. So during preparation of the seed bed, manure is very important. Said that plenty of times we cultivate this to have fertility. So we need to give right importance to this stage. Every plant during their development, they do need to find the soil that has been ripped for the first 30-40 centimeters, and by that time it will have a surfacing part. It will have strong roots that can go down to the deeper layers of the soil. We have some examples of root apparatus. We have wet in the middle, goes down to 1 meter 20, 30 centimeters. If we plant it as manure, the roots will explore the width of the whole field. We have sunflower that goes down to 1 meter 70. We have maize. You can clearly see its roots. We have beet, and then we have alfalfa. Less of these examples, it can reach a depth of 3 meters. What does this mean? Its depth is very important because it brings oxygen down in the deeper layers, and what's in the deeper layers is brought back up to the surface. Thomas, can you go back to the previous slide? I just wanted to. We have red clover, lupin, and alfalfa. They get to 1.52 meters depth. Then we have vetch, rapeseed, and mustard. They reach around 1 meter depth.
Vi il caso dell'Italia, però comunque poi lo rapportate.
So this is the case of Italy, but you can also apply it to other situations. We have just harvested the pumpkins in September, October, before I go to rainfall season. I prepare the soil, my soil therefore is ready. So before the rainfall, I will sow my green manure. I will sow it by hand, by machine. So I prepare the sowing bed. So with the first rainfall, it will start to grow. Of course, this was a good green manuring. I'm a professional, I'm a technician or a person who has studied it. And I do this a mixed green manure which will grow and develop, of course, step by step. This mixed green manure will grow and we will get to the blossoming. Let's say this happens around mid-April to the end of May or something in June also. Let's say it takes 1 month, 1 month and a half. And the blooming, talking about the um, broad bean, for example, when it starts to bloom from the flower, you will get the seed. And when you have the seed, the nitrogen which was taken in the roots, which will be mobilized once again. So I can intervene in that very moment. So if I want to cultivate after this green manure and I want to cultivate other kinds of products like tomatoes, aubergines, or others, and giving it fertility in the short and middle term. When I do this transplantation, I do it generally in at the end of April. So I will work on this green manure. I will cut everything and I will bury it in the soil through the machine. This soil was chopped before, so I do not need to pass the reaper once again. These plants are already there, the roots are already there, so I don't need to work again with the tractor. I have a deep rooting gained through the machine in 20 centimeters depth. And I cut all these plants, I cut this green manure. After 3-4 days of sun, it will lose humidity. So please don't run, don't talk too fast, just for the translators. It's just about passion. This is why I speak so fast. I would like to say a lot of things. So anyhow, I will chop it and I will cut these plants and I will sow this soil. They will be attacked by the microorganisms. And at the end of April, for example, I will put my tomatoes, aubergines, and my crops, the next crop. So let's say, so by doing this, I'm providing nutrients to the plants, which I will cultivate afterwards. This is a case where if in the previous cropping has consumed a lot of my soils, I'm talking about crop rotations, which crops which use a lot of nutrients and consume a lot of nutrients, or otherwise I have a terrain which is weak in fertility and I want to give it a further fertility for the next cropping. But there is an important case where I have to say I use these green menus since many years. Since many years, I collect information and study it, and I have a good level of organic substances. Of course, you have to consider which kind of soil do you have. You can also see all the tables on my website, and you can consult it also. If I have a specific kind of soil with a 3% of organic substance, this means that you have an excellent soil. But if I have a clay soil which does not keep a lot of the organic substance, having a 3% level of organic substance is a low level. So I have to consider the nature of the soil itself. If I have a soil which is given texture and I produce vegetables and the level of 3% organic substance, I have a good substance. I was good at doing so. And in that case, if I can, I will not chop it in the short term, but I will leave these plants either to become seeds or I will chop them in a following stage, even in June, July, let's say, so that the relationship between carbon and nitrogen, that in the first case was very low, so in favor of nitrogen, in favor of ready to use elements, I will make it more mature and I will provide for much more carbon elements, giving much more carbon and fibers to my soil, a lot of fibers, a lot of carbon, which will translate into microorganisms and humus. I'm giving a fertility, not just on the short term, but also on the long term. So this is maybe the difficult point to be understood, but still it's easy to explain. Fertility on the long term means I know that I want to keep fertility for the coming years, or I have this field which I want to keep stocked for 1 2 years. Then I have to do some kind of green manures to provide fertility in humus in the long term. I need a fast income, fast money, like I said before. So I have to work on short-term shopping. So I have to consider a different approach, let's say. Mature green manure means that when nitrogen is transformed from the roots to the seeds is becoming a protein. So in that case, microorganisms take much more time, even over 1 year, to affect it and to bring it back to the form of the plants. So I'm providing complex nutrients in a slow process. But if I chop it, I'm giving fertilizers which are ready to use. Just to explain in a few words to the farmers, mature green manure is extremely important for fast results, where we can count good quantities of humus, stable quantity for vegetable mass, which is buried, and the biomass is homogeneously distributed, chopped, and well buried. Few availability of nutrients, which means that I have a lot of nutrients in the soil, but I want to keep them also. Keep nutrients and minerals. Looks hard, but in the end, believe me, it's very easy. But I hope that I explained to you in a way. Well, the most commonly used tools are the following ones: the chopping machines used to cut also different kinds of ways of pruning and shredding machines. Recently, we have these shredding machines, horizontal shredding machines, which uses different techniques, leaving big sizes of green manures. So they don't really chop it in small parts, but they leave bigger parts of a green manure. So this is extremely interesting because we can work on different aspects, of course. By way of example, if I want uh, a faster speed, of course, I have to modulate the speed of these machineries, of course, so that I can decide if I want to make the green manure just dust. It will become dust. It will be under the sun for 2 3 days, and I will provide for nutrients which will last for 3 4 months for the next crop. So if with the same shredding machine I use a slow speed, it depends also on the nature of your soil, but still, if I go slower or faster, if I go slower, for example, I will leave bigger pieces of green manures. These will be elements which will be available for the next 2 3 months, but also other elements which will be smaller maybe, and which will be available in the long term. And of course, the big parts and the smaller parts are affected by microorganisms with different speeds, of course. Also, this is the most important thing. The roller creep, the roller crimper, and I want to say it in English because I don't trust my pronunciation. Well, it's a commonly used tool. It does something which is very easily. It's a roll with these shades, a V-shaped shades, and it works in a very easy way. There are other versions of it with water inside this thing, this roll. These shades attack the bases of grasses, brassicas, and others. So if I just pass the wheels of the tractor on the green manure, I just squeeze it, but with the next rain, it will stand up once again. This machine will attack the very first 10, 12 centimeters of the bases of the plant, so that the plants will not be unable to stand up once again. I will tell you when to use it because it's interesting. by doing so, especially I advise it for southern Italy, because it keeps the cover of the soil, considering a very hot spring season, for example. By doing this green manure, I create this soil, I block the organic and the nutrients present there, so I keep the grass on the surface that will become from green to yellow. Of course, it will become dry, but still I will be working on 10, 12 centimeters of biomass on the soil with the microorganisms going into the roots of the plant itself. So the evolution is that in the previously treated soils, this just not apply to Italy, but also to other things, to other situations, of course. Well, by doing so, I can directly enter in this field after using this roller crimper with a transplanter machine, and I will put the plants directly on this surface. This mulching surface, and I will have a mulching surface for 3 4 months, which is 20 centimeters high, let's say, which occupies all the entire surface, which spreads nutrients. It will spread also water, and this thick layer, just like straw in small domestic orchards, for example, swine or straw. We are talking about just small orchards in companies, big companies. It's not remunerative, I have to say. Uh, by doing this, well, this technique can be compared to straw, but we can apply it to hectares of cultivations and doing our cultivation on a mulching soil. It works on specific soils, which can allow it, because of course a clay soil is not proper for this kind of technique. But on these soils allowing these mulching techniques, it's I can advise it to you to do so, because you will save a lot of money and it's an interesting opportunity for your company. If it will work, I'll be happy for sure. I started it. So I studied this technique in Ohio, in the United States, in Sandusky, close to Timberland, and they used this kind of green manuring. It was extremely interesting. I saw it and I was really catched by this technique. Please go on with the slides. I don't know if some of you know it. So very unfortunately, we don't have so much time to share our views. Practical advice: prefer varieties not present on the farm. I have not to say. Of course, I will put oat in my field because it sounds good. Of course, oat is already there, so I have to apply, for example, barley, wheat, and other grasses or legumes or brassicas, which are not already present in my company, because increasing the genetic pool of crops in green manures is fundamental to increase the fertility, and it's fundamental for biodiversity, so creating new insects, new microorganisms in the soil. So never opting for existing varieties, but trying to foster new species. Of course, I will also put oats and other things, of course, but please do include species which are not present. Crucifers like rapeseed, for example, horseradish. So if I have a green manure, when in March I will have a high quantity of potatoes, for example, February, March, I will put potatoes or pumpkins, like, for example, this is always the same example. Well, these plants need a lot of potassium, so before or after that to mobilize it. So basically, I will use a green manure with a relevant percentage of rapeseed, then it will fix the nutrients in the terrain, making it ready for the following crops. So it save a lot of money in fertilizers and other things. So if I'm particularly good at doing so, I will save really a lot of money by getting to the same results. For example, if you have an hectare, Do try it on 1,000 liters, for example. Use this green manure with a good percentage of rapeseed, for example, and you will see that you will get the same results as the results you will get on the rest of the field, of course, but saving a lot of money. Of course, these are not just two opposites. Of course, they could be a good combination of, for example, a good percentage of rapeseed and a combination of potassium nutrients, which will be placed on the soil. These are just good inputs that I'm giving you. The study of weeds essences crossed with any specific fertility problems detected by the analysis can give important indications on the essences to be chosen. Studying the weeds and studying which weeds are present in the soil will help us in understanding which solutions are to be found. Weeds, of course, are to be considered. My university professor was always teaching this to us, was telling us you have to consider if a soil is rich in potassium, poor in nitrogen, rich in nitrogen, and whatever. You have to study the structure of the soil itself, let's say. There is a great book in French, which was also translated into Italian, but I don't remember the title. If some will remember, it was an expensive book, I have to say, and talking about weeds, which detects all the types of weeds present in all the world and says the main features regarding the weeds. If some of you from France, maybe if you remember this book, please tell me. But anyhow, on my website, you will find some references to this publication and to this mapping of the weeds, because it helps us in understanding which soil we have before us, which are its characteristics and features, and how and help us in understanding how to solve the issues. Inca sent us a link, maybe it's sharing. Uh, Maybe, yeah. So okay, we will revert to it afterwards.
Okay, let's have some practical examples. We do not cultivate, we do not want to produce, but we want biomass. So practical example. We understood that mixtures are better than exclusive manures. Simple mixtures that we use in the Mediterranean is field bean, oat, and mustard. Field bean is 150 kilos per hectare. Oat, we use 120 kilos. We are talking about manure, obviously, because if we wanted to blend oat, I could use 150 kilos, and mustard 8 to 10 kilos. But what I'm doing is creating a mixture. It's 3 mixtures. I have field bean for hectare, 150 kilos for each hectare. So I will be doing 150 divided by 3. If I had a mixture of 6 species, I will be dividing by 6, and so on. So for each hectare, I will be using 50 kilos of field bean. We have 150 of oat. We put 50 kilos of oat. Mustard, we use 3.3 kilos per hectare. I will be mixing the seeds. I could do it by hand. It sounds prehistoric, but it's very, very easy. My father can sow by hand an entire field, entire hectare in a day. So if I use more professional mixtures with 9, 10 varieties, I will have to be dividing for each hectare by the number of species I'm using. And let's go on with the slides. So in order to sum up, manure using grasses, we have oat, barley, ryegrass. They have um, great volumes of root apparatus. They move a lot of earth. They thus improve the fine structure thanks to their roots. Great profit in humus because I'm putting in a lot of fiber. I'm enhancing the carbon nitrate ratio, uh, not to be sold exclusively because you will be having the nitrogen starvation effect. So when digesting the whole mass, the organisms they use, uh, the nitrogen that is present. So when uh, while growing, these cereals will be deficient in nitrogen, and this is a problem with very ancient wet varieties, and usually branches were left in the field, and this particular biomass was reducing the presence of nitrogen in the field, which is somewhat counterintuitive, but it is. So what has human being thought of burning the branches? You were burning the residues. Then we noticed that we were losing even more nutrients by doing so. So what do? We chop them a little earlier, or you just mix it. You do not use exclusively grasses. You mix it up with legumes. Alessio, you have 5 minutes. I'm sorry to put the pressure on you. So while you will have the presentation available for you, so you can go back and check it. So using legumes, vetch, field bean, clover, they have a taproot system which goes in depth within the soil. It releases nitrogen, very, very interesting. We have the three types of clover that I will be rapidly explaining. So legumes, they interfere with the um, tillage ban. But if I mix many types of legumes, these roots, they break the tillage ban. It's like they are performing a soil ripping operation. And in many cases, I will be working with the first 15, 20 centimeters. So thanks to this particular manure, that will be saved for me. So these are a couple tricks to get the maximum possible levels of nitrogen, having close to neutral pH, having good ventilation. So it would be good to perform a first soil ripping. You need sufficiently high temperature, and you need sufficient phosphorus. So that helps the plant to flourish. Phosphorus helps the roots, and potassium for the fruit. So taste and color, it's a balance. It's not so easy, but if any one of these elements is missing, we will have deficiencies. So mustards, rapeseed, mustard, rockets. Mustards are somewhat in between legumes and grasses. They always have to be there because they stimulate microorganisms. They are very important for our biodiversity. They mobilize different elements that bring different kinds of fertility to our soil. They and to mention just a couple, phosphorus and obviously potassium, they have a carbon to nitrate ratio, which is intermediate between legumes and grasses. But not all soils are the same, not every year is the same. Sometimes it's a bit colder, sometimes a bit warmer, and that means that if I use different mixtures, every year I will have different results every year. But if I use a mixture of many mustards, I will surely have results every year. This tillage radish or American radish is really is the champion. It has a taproot of goes down to 50, 60 centimeters, but the degradation is very important because it has a taproot that degrades in a very fast way with the first cold temperatures. So clay soils, poor soils, it will be very interesting to insert this tillage radish in the mixture for the manure because it brings about a great deal of microorganisms, of nutrients, but it most of all it rips through these clay type soils. So many other varieties that could be used. Buckwheat, Pazzilia has a super short cycle, beautiful blue purple flowers, reaches great heights in a small time, such as buckwheat. So Alessio, I know you could be. I just wanted to introduce the last two slides and then I'm done. In my life, I've done two great things, maybe more, but this two I share with joy. Horticultura Bio, my site, fortunately in Italian, only in Italian, all the manure plants you can use. You have hundreds of varieties and you have information for each variety. You can see it in the slide. You can create your own mixtures just by checking out the specifics of each variety. I also have a YouTube channel in which I specifically talk about manure. Again, unfortunately, it is only in Italian. I wanted to recommend you my site because it's very widely used in universities and such. And last slide, I had the opportunity to write this book, Horticultura Biologica da Reddito, Biological Horticulture. It's really going around among farmers, a lot of information on manure and many other things. Let me just advertise myself a little bit, but I wanted most of all to thank all of you. I had to speed through the second part, trying to mention the most important things. What we need to do now is try out this manure and share our knowledge. Thomas. Alessio, I wanted to thank you. A lot of extremely interesting notions. The focus was on Italy, Southern Europe this time, but these are fundamental ground concepts that we can apply all over the world. You just need to um, identify what kind of soil we're working with, identify the main issues and which kind of crops to apply. I would like to invite you to pose a couple of questions. You can send them to us over the chat. We will be answering you uh, within the report that we will be writing. So anyone can intervene and can pose a question to Alessio. Any volunteers? Thomas, we have some questions. There, a couple of those are in Spanish, but there is also a question in Italian. I will be putting it up for everybody. Questions are always so hard when we discuss about this. So if unless I can read Spanish, I'll be putting it up right now. In your opinion, biodynamic products can they stimulate our soil? This is a very hard question. Question was about biodynamic products. Can they stimulate microorganisms in the soil, favor their microbiological balance? Okay, I use an organic approach. I've never wanted to limit myself to one particular type of agriculture. I try to use a bit of everything to see what works. So yes, this particular type of products can stimulate microorganisms, but in my opinion, there are so many techniques that are easier and cheaper that work so much better. So it works, but there's better options, in my opinion. Obviously, I'm not God. Everyone has their own ideas.
Ti ho
Sì,
messo...
sì, no, no, possiamo approfondire, però non...
We can go in depth,
It's a
but
complex issue. Talking about biodynamics, we have to say a lot of things. There are some easier techniques giving broader feedbacks. So being stuck in biodynamics has a sense, but if I have to consider all the aspects, of course, it becomes a tangled issue. Still, there are much more interesting choices to opt for. Another question, which is not an easy question. Carla is asking us an opinion on the Unicea area. I never used it, but I know some companies which used it. I can get some information. Then I will collect my info and I will revert to you. In these days, I will be staying home. It's raining outside, so I will be staying home and will collect information on the experience of these companies, and I will revert to you. There are hundreds of species used in the green manure, of course. The simplest ones are most commonly used, which are also the cheapest ones, of course, but this is not falling within the most used in central Italy or in southern Italy. But I will revert to you after having contacted this company which actually uses it. Can we reply after a few days? Yes, for sure. For sure, we will try to provide an answer to all the questions. Also, in the coming days, if you want. It's 4 o'clock, so now I would like to invite my colleagues to launch a link in the chat There is a shorter question with a survey with 2 or 3 questions. I would like to kindly ask you to reply to these questions. It will take just 30 seconds. I would like to thank you a lot. I want to thank Alessio for his extremely seminar interventions, all my colleagues who collaborated for making this seminar come true.